Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your language arts lesson for today. I do not have a what you will need for you for today because you're really not going to need very much today except to listen to me. So you'll eventually need your language arts materials packet because that's where your homework is going to be located. But for now, you can just sit back and listen. So, our two objectives for today, our first one is to introduce Gilgamesh, it says, and our second one is to review homework expectations. So, Gilgamesh, you say, what is that? You probably have a hint if you've been looking at your materials. So, I've been telling you in a lot of our lessons that we will be getting to reading a text together and that we kind of have been doing background information to help set us up for the conversations that we're going to have for the rest of the year. So, our first text that we're going to be starting reading tomorrow is this text, Gilgamesh the Hero. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit of information about Gilgamesh and the story and how we found it. As a precursor to our work with it. So, Gilgamesh was an ancient king. He ruled around 2500 BCE. He ruled in a city-state called Uruk, which is located in Sumer. So hopefully in your history, you guys have studied a little bit about Sumer. And so that history kind of connects to our story, that this is from a similar part of the world. We're looking at Mesopotamia and kind of the Fertile Crescent area, and that's where this story is going to be set. And so there's some similarities to what you've studied in your history. Gilgamesh was, so like I said, he was a real king. He really ruled. However, much of this story would not be considered nonfiction. A lot of the story is fiction. And as we get into it, you'll see that it's a lot more like mythology. If you've read mythology, then it is like nonfiction or historical fiction. Okay, so we're seeing it'll be a lot of things that probably wouldn't have happened in real life. That said, ultimately Gilgamesh was known as a wise and just ruler, and this is true in his time. He was known to be wise and just. Now, ultimately, we kind of historically forgot about him. There wasn't much known about him until archaeologists were excavating and they ended up finding these tablets. And these tablets told the story of this person, Gilgamesh. And so, but it was written in Sumerian language, and so it took some time to translate it. But ultimately, when they translated it, those tablets telling the story of Gilgamesh became what we now call the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, if you were to be here in ninth grade at Nova, actually, they read an original, like a translation of the original text. So theirs is really linked to that original text. Our text is not a translation of the original. Geraldine McCaughrean is an author who kind of adapted it to make it a little bit more accessible to younger audiences. And so we're reading her adaptation of it. So it'll be based on the original, but it's not a direct translation of the original. And actually, once upon a time, this is probably a lot of years ago, but after having taught this book many times, I thought, I really enjoy reading and teaching this book. And so I emailed Geraldine McCaughrean and just sort of thanked her for this book and said that it was something that was a high point or a highlight of my year. And she actually emailed me back. She's still alive. And so hopefully I will remember as we get to the end of the book that I will share her email. She talks a little bit about you all and a little bit about the book as well. So once we've read it a little, I hope to remember to share that. So yes, these tablets were found and they began to be translated. And ultimately, they're kind of got some fame from this epic as it got translated because historians noticed that there was this story of a man who was living at a time when the humans were bothering the gods, and so the gods decided to banish all of humanity through a giant flood that would cover the whole earth, except he got warned, and so he built a large boat, and he filled that boat with animals, and then he stayed afloat that boat, and then ultimately saved all of humanity and saved the world. Now, this was very interesting to historians at this time because there was a very similar story in the Christian Bible talking about another man who did just the same thing. And so they noticed this connection of sharing of stories between cultures and how interesting this is. And they actually started to notice since then that there were flood stories that were occurring in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different religions. So we see that this sort of oral history of sharing and passing down stories that you tell to one another, and they see that it really crossed over cultures. So this kind of got some fame for this story of Gilgamesh. People were thinking, what is this story that sounds so much like other stories that we know? Okay. So after that, archaeologists started looking for more and more and more tablets that they could translate. And ultimately, now we have about 80% of the tablets they've estimated found. So some of them are broken. So that's part of how they can estimate the amount, right? If you see a tablet, if the tablets are kind of uniform size and then you see parts are broken off, they can sort of gauge about how much of it seems to be missing. So a lot of the story we have translated, but there's still 20% of it that is probably gone, lost forever, okay? So ultimately, we will be taking a look at this story. As we kind of talk about this idea of creation myths, this story is really a lot less about creation, but Gilgamesh, we'll see, is a character who kind of faces tragedy in his life, and really it gets at that human struggle with tragedy and how you kind of have to work through things that are difficult or challenging or hard. Um, we'll have this question of hubris kind of lingering. So remember um, this idea of excessive pride leading to a downfall. And so we should kind of be hanging on to that question of does Gilgamesh show hubris or not? And it really hinges on this idea of does he have a downfall or not? So that's a question we're going to reflect on. And then and in terms of a theme, really this driving theme is this desire to live forever, this desire to avoid death. So this gives you just a really brief introduction to the story, but we'll get into it. We'll start reading it tomorrow and jump in. So this gives you a little bit of that background knowledge. So let's talk a little bit. Our lessons have looked a certain way, and they're really going to shift from here on out to being pretty similar lessons for the remainder of the school year, truly. So you can expect that each day we're going to be having an objective of sorts, and that's something that I really want you to be paying attention to as we're reading through the text. So it's a question or something to guide your thinking as you're thinking about what it is that we're wrestling with throughout the course of the chapter. And for Gilgamesh, it's really going to be about a chapter at a time, but some of our other texts, we're going to read more than a chapter at a time. So with that objective, that's something that I'll be thinking about and asking about as we go. I will be, in my recordings, I will be reading aloud to you from the text. So I kind of have a couple of things to say about that. First, remember what I've said, I've kind of repeated this again and again and again, that to listen to stories are a great way to gain appreciation for them, but for your actual reading skills to improve, for your ability to decode words, for your ability to add to your vocabulary, for your ability to understand complex sentence structures, you really need to have your eyes on the text as I am reading. So when I'm reading to you, I don't want you looking at the video. I want you looking in your book and following along. So I know I've said you can use all kinds of things. Maybe a bookmark or even just a piece of paper can help you to track as you're reading, right? You can hold the paper down to keep you focused. You could use a thinker. You don't have to use those things. You could probably do it without, but if you're having a tough time focusing while I'm reading, that's something that you could do. I will be talking as we're going, so I won't just read straight through. I'll stop and I'll be pointing things out or asking questions or guiding your thinking more. So I know that for some of you, you'll want to just read on through. And I would say if you want to do that, that's great. But then I still encourage you to come back and listen as well, because there's going to be things that I'm going to be saying in the course of the video that you won't necessarily make connections on as you are reading on your own. In addition to that, our homework structure is going to change. Up to this point, I gave you hard copies of a lot of things and you were writing on them and taking pictures. From here on out, it's going to be a lot more Google Forms, things where you're going to be going in and answering the questions about what we've just read. So, smart reading strategy always is if you are reading with questions to be answered, it's always smart to read through the questions first. So open up that Google form first, read through the questions. That helps you so that when you're reading through the text, you can be paying attention to those answers. Another really great possible strategy would be to read what the question is and then play the video and be reading along and listening. And you could actually pause in the middle. If you hear the answer to a question, you could pause the video and go over and actually select that answer or write in that answer, and then go back to the video and press play again. And then again, pay attention for the second question. And the questions are going to go in order. So you could go back and forth as you go. Another option would be if you are someone who enjoys writing and that helps you a lot, you could open up your questions, you could write the questions down, and then as you're reading, you could be looking and writing down those answers in your notebook. And then when it's time to click those answers, it'll make it a lot easier to go over and select those answers. So there's a lot of different strategies that you could try for helping with this homework. So with that in mind, a couple of things to remind you of because it's been kind of a while. Some of the questions I'll ask you will be multiple choice. Okay, and in that case, you're just going to click an answer. Okay. Some of them will be short answer though. And you should remember, this is kind of reaching back to one of our earlier lessons that I gave a lesson about answering questions, right? And how I told you that you need to be answering questions using as many words from the question in your answer as possible. And the reason is to really make sure that you're clear on what it is you're being asked. And it's also helping you to form complete thoughts, not just a fragment of a thought, but also the whole thought, putting it all together. And this is a part of being a great writer. It's a part of being a great orator. It's part of being a great thinker, is being able to construct a complete thought. So, short answer questions, I'm going to expect that you guys are going to use as many words from the question in your answer as possible. And I hope that as I'm saying this, it's bringing you back to that earlier assignment where I had you practice how to answer questions. And I was really pushing you to use as many. And I said, does she really mean as many words as possible? The answer is yes, I do. I really mean as many, even if it's a really long, and some of our questions will have really long questions. I want you to rephrase the whole thing as you're giving that answer back. So I will often, if you forget, which I understand, this is a new skill we're building, but if you forget, I'm going to return your homework and ask you to, I might return your homework. I might have you ask you in the comments to please retry your short answer questions again, using as many words as possible from the question in your answers. That's something that I really want you to remember. And then also when I'm asking you to use vocabulary sentences, remember that they need to be at least 6 words long, and they really have to show me that you understand what the word means. So it shouldn't be fortitude starts with an F, or fortitude is in the dictionary. I even don't want you just to define the word, right? Fortitude means using bravery in tough situations. What I want you to do is use it in context. So the brave girl used fortitude when she faced her fears and spoke in front of the class. Then I know that you understand what that word means, okay? So again, as we're thinking about moving forward, there's going to be objectives that I'm going to have you thinking about as you're reading. There's going to be questions that I want you to be looking for the answers to as you're reading. And again, it's great to go back and forth or to copy down questions and then look for them as you're reading and writing down the answers. Remember that I'm going to be talking to you about the text as I'm reading it to you. Remember that your eyes should be on the words as I'm reading them, because that's what's going to help you to be the best reader that you can be. And then remember also that your sentences, your answers, short answers should use as many words from the question in your answers as possible, and that your vocabulary sentences should really show me that you understand what the meaning of the word is. So with that in mind, 5th graders, tonight's homework, which is in your packet, is this practicing how to answer questions. You'll see it's got a 2 right there. This is the second one. Again, the goal, the purpose of this assignment is to really get you practicing using as many words as possible. So when you tell me what is your favorite pizza topping, don't just write pepperoni. While I love learning about you, that's not the purpose of the assignment. The purpose is for you to practice. My favorite pizza topping is pepperoni. What is your favorite book you've read at Nova Classical Academy? Don't just write Peter Pan, right? My favorite book that I've read at Nova Classical Academy is Peter Pan. So you have to really make sure that you're not just rushing, you're practicing the skill that I want you to be practicing, which is complete sentences using as many words from the question in your answer as possible. Okay, and our backside again has another option for, or another opportunity for writing a vocabulary sentence using temperance. And again, don't tell me temperance is a word that starts with T. Temperance is a word in the dictionary. Temperance is a virtue, right? We want to use the word in context. Show me that you understand the word and how to use it. My last caution, fifth graders, is that for a long while-ish, we won't be in this packet. Do not lose it. You have some very, very, very important notes in there that are going to be coming up. So if you are worried that you might lose it, I would take it and put it right into your white binder so that you don't lose it, because we are not done with it and it's got important notes in there. So fifth graders, I'm excited to see you guys show me that you remember how I'm asking you to answer questions, and I'm especially excited to start our first book tomorrow. So good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll get back to it tomorrow.